What's up? Welcome into the Vivobarefoot Health Broadcast. My name's Kellen, my lad. I'm a movement coach and the creator of Movement Parallels Life. Today I'm excited to take you through about a 20-minute ground-based primal movement practice. We're going to be focusing on developing general mobility and conditioning. And when I say primal movement, I know that can mean different things to different people. But for me, this just means that we're building today's session around foundational human movements. All right, so here's the deal. Today's practice is going to be divided into two parts. In part one, that's where we connect. So we're going to introduce some basic positions and movements to warm up, prep the joints, and give you the opportunity to check in with your body and just kind of see where you're at today. Then in part two, we're going to explore. That's when we'll build on these movements. We'll start exploring some specific techniques. We'll make some room for play and creativity. And this is also where you can start to add more intensity and complexity to your practice. Now, I've designed this class to be as accessible as possible while sharing with you kind of my unique take on primal movement training. So if you're brand new to the practice, welcome. I want to encourage you to make yourself comfortable, to modify any of these movements so that they work for your body. We don't want you moving into painful ranges of motion or feeling like you have to force yourself to perform these movements. In fact, we want to start to let go of this idea of perfect form or exact form and open the space up so you can understand movement on your terms. And understand this is a practice, this is a process, it takes patience, it takes time, it takes mindfulness. But if you keep up with these movements, it'll all come together in a beautiful way. All right, so that's my quick intro. I just want to give you some context and set the tone, but I'm so happy to have you here. Now let's get moving. Okay, so again, this first part of our practice is where we connect. We're going to be going through some basic positions and movement variations that are going to allow you to mobilize, prep your joints, and just check in, see what's going on with your body today. We can start off in a knee-hand position. And I'm going to begin here by rocking back and forth. So encourage you to spread your fingers and glue your palms into the ground. Keep your spine long, your core braced, and just kind of relax and breathe as you move forward and back. And from there, start shifting around in circles. So I want you to really sense your connection to the ground. Sense the stability through the middle of your body and make these movements relaxed. You can make your way back to center and then go into some spinal articulation, rounding your spine. Inhale and start to extend your spine, taking your gaze to the ceiling. And go through a few cycles there. Rounding, extending. Work within your available range of motion and coordinate your movements with your breathing. You can even start rocking, incorporating the flexion and extension with the rocking action. Now you can stay there or stabilize yourself and place one hand behind your head, going through some thoracic rotations. It's about 4 or 5 rotations here, and then switch. Just a few more seconds in this knee-hand position. Next, we're going to transition to our ground sits. So just looking at these different ways that we can sit on the ground, starting off with our bent sit position. So you can focus on maintaining an elongated spine here. You can do that by grabbing onto the backs of your knees or the fronts, or maybe you can just hold that. And from this basic sitting position, maybe adding in some rotations, or starting to walk yourself in a circle and reach overhead, forwards, sideways, back. You can show your spine some love, flexing and extending. So just these different variations, mobilizations that we can do from these different sitting positions. Next, you can take the knees to the side, find our side sit. Hands can post back behind your hips. You can switch from side to side by keeping your feet in contact with the ground, taking your knees from one side to the other. So after that bit of hip rotation, maybe you cross your legs. Fine, we'll call this a cross sit position. Really nice way to open the hips. Check in on both sides. Again, you can hold on to your thighs or your knees and gently guide yourself into a twist. Fold forward or any reaching. And next we'll move on, transitioning to a kneeling position. So give yourself the opportunity to check in here, see how this feels on your ankles and your knees. Adjust the height if you're feeling any pain, so you can start in a tall kneeling position and maybe start to sit. You can play around with whether your feet are flat or flexed. Your flexed feet is going to bring a little bit more stretch. You can also start adding in some rotations. From this low kneeling position, you can rise up. There's going to be a subtle weight shift to one side, so you can step one leg out, now coming into a half kneeling position. From here, you can start to glide, getting a nice stretch through the back hip, and then beginning to mobilize the front hip, knee, and ankle. Glide back, hold your balance, return to kneeling. Try the other side. You can go back and forth, side to side, and check out the different angles. I'm always trying to add a lot of variation and diversity to our movement practice. And we can even take that into a squat position. So we'll move on, maybe coming into this deep squat position. Any expression of the squat that works for you. So it might be more in a split or inline stance. You might feel your heels coming up off the ground, that's fine. I think oftentimes we get locked into this idea that we have to have this perfect squat position, or any of these movements have to have a singular or exact form, and it's just not really the case. When you look at all the different ways that we can work with a squat pattern, or this can be expressed in everyday life or everyday activities, it starts to open things up and give you a little bit more freedom to explore. In addition to our deep squat, we can also layer in some crawling. So plant the hands, shift the weight, start to walk your feet back, elongating your body, holding this base crawl position, and can walk the hands back, transitioning back into the deep squat, repositioning, moving around the space, and from the deep squat can Post the hands back behind, and we'll come into this inverted crawl position. And maybe just holding this position to start with. You don't need a ton of movement yet, but maybe just playing around with maintaining the stability as you shift your weight. Transition back to a deep squat. And one more time in the foot hand crawl. Squat. Inverted crawl. The last segment here in our check-in, coming down to a supine position, supine line, and hugging the knees in towards the chest, bracing the core, holding this compact position, nice and round, and you can hold onto your knees as you begin creating a smooth rocking action. So if this is painful on your spine, I'd encourage you to limit the movement or give yourself some additional padding. But you can rock up to a seated position, or you can also start to extend and roll to the side. And at this point, these basic movements, we don't have to get too overly technical about it. Your body will start to find the efficient form, the form that works best for you through practice. But let these movements be simple, let them be playful, let them be fun. You start to explore and also listen to the feedback and the messages that your body sends as you go through these different patterns. So we've got our side rolling here. We can do that different ways, and that links up with our rocking, which can start to open things up with some rotation. All right, that's time. Again, that connect portion of our session is your warm-up, and it's your opportunity to go through some movements in a gentle way, observe your body, and just kind of see where you're at. Now, we'll build on that foundation. We'll start opening these movements up, adding more play and creativity. We'll look at some specific skills, and this is also the time when you can start to up the intensity level if that's what's going to be best for you today. So we're going to go through 5 different movement techniques. We'll start to tighten things up. We'll go for 60-second intervals, and we're going to go through this series for 2 consecutive rounds. So you can start off back in our knee hand position. Start off to one side of your mat, and then going to work through a hip roll. So sitting to one hip, there's just going to be a little weight shift to softly sit to the hip, roll right across, and back into the knee hand position. Shift the weight, softly sit, and roll across. So there's a lot that we can add into this, but we'll just start out with this first interval, very basic. Knee hand position, shift, sit, roll across. Maybe start adding in some crawling steps on hands and knees and timing the roll. Okay, our second movement. Coming back to this side sit position, you can post your hands behind your hips and take your knees from side to side. This is our swivel switch. You can start to expand on that by taking the hands away If that's a struggle, you can keep your hands posted. As you finish in this side sit position, I encourage you to keep your spine elongated, shoulders back, be able to sit tall. And we can also add in another switch, adding a little bit more momentum by kicking the back leg forward. Got a figure 4 leg position. Switch the legs. Wrap your straight leg back. So I'm going to push off the ground. Spin and switch. Next movement. Make sure you've got some room behind so you can rock back and rock up. So we're going through these mixed rock ups, coming into different sitting positions. So you can rock back and rock up into your cross sit. Rock back and rock up to your side sit. Bent sit. You can extend your legs, long sit, or rock up into this figure 4 leg position with some momentum, transition to half kneeling. All right, next movement, crawling. So make a transition back to our standard foot hand crawl position, and maybe begin by just marching the hands. Keep your knees low to the ground, keep your spine long, core strong. Arms locked out when on support, but when I pick up, one arm softens. Then you can try an opposite hand-foot balance. From the opposite hand-foot balance, see if you can rotate away from the support arm. Your free leg is going to pass underneath your body. It'll bring you right into the inverted crawl position. Same thing here. Maybe just some side to side shifting, picking up the hands, or an opposite hand-foot balance. You can rotate back, shift back, walking the hands to the feet, and then we'll finish our series by coming into a deep squat. So I encourage you to explore this deep squat position. Don't feel like you need to be bound to perfect form. Especially when you think about if you've been raised to go through school and sit in a chair and sit at desks, and you have a job that requires you to commute or sit at a desk for an extended period of time. All that adds up and takes a toll on our mobility. It takes time to reclaim these ranges, so you might as well put that work in and have some fun with it in the process. So allow your squat to be yours, and it'll improve with time and practice. So let's go back one more round through, back to our hip rolls. So in this second round, you've got a sense of the pattern, and you can start to play and improvise. So moving around your space on hands and knees. And as you feel things out, you know where you are in space. You can add in those hip rolls, maybe making them a little bit more dynamic. Start out building the pattern slowly, and then making it smoother and smoother, and then in time, the speed comes. Transitioning into our side sit position. Back leg comes forward. Sit back on the hips. Switch the figure 4 legs. Wrap the straight leg back. So we work it slowly. Bring the leg forward. Switch. Lean. Wrap the leg back. Use your hands in contact with the ground to push off and drive the spin. From this side sit position, also rise up onto your knees. You can also add in the swivel switches. Onto our rock ups. Rock back, rock up. You can spend some time in the sitting position or the half kneeling position. You can even rock back, rock up onto your feet to a squat. These rock ups might even inspire you to rise up to standing. You can turn it into a full get up. Rock up one last time, then transition to your crawl. Now, starting to open things up with our crawling patterns. If you felt strong and stable on your opposite hand-foot balance, then maybe the opposite hand and foot can step together. Moving around your space, repositioning your hands and feet. I encourage you to get out of those straight lines as soon as possible. Opposite hand-foot balance, pass under, and work your inverted crawling. Extend from your legs, set your heel, and pull forward from the heel. Keep your hips a bit closer to your hands. Your legs will support themselves. Your shoulders can use the extra help by keeping your hips in close, so you don't want to crawl out here. And then our transition into the deep squat. You can hang out here, start to walk around. And maybe this is just holding the position for you right now. Maybe that's the right expression. Ways that you can modify your deep squat. Roll up a towel and use that to lift your heels to accommodate your mobility. And you can also develop a squat on your toes. This is going to be very useful, very practical strength to build through this. So it doesn't always have to be that standard flat-footed squat. Toe squat, or even these expressions, variations of the squat or half kneeling. It all comes back to helping you develop or reclaim the mobility that's going to allow you to move more freely. All right, friends, that's it for today's short primal movement practice. The big takeaway on this is that when it comes to movement, if you don't use it, you're gonna lose it. And that's what happens to so many people. Think about it. When we're kids, we're loose, we're limber, we're mobile, and we're encouraged to move in all these different ways. But the older we get, the more our movement is confined to exercise, and our lifestyle becomes really limited in terms of how much movement we get in our lives. So as a result, we get stiff, we lose our mobility, we run into aches and pains and injuries, and we just generally chalk it up to aging. But I want you to know that you can change that narrative, and it all comes down to your habits. So support your fitness with general movement practice like this. And you can see it doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be so structured, so rigid, sets and reps, but it can be open, it can be playful, it can be explorative, and it can still be very effective for bridging the gap between a somewhat sedentary life and your fitness goals. And I know that if you take care of yourself, if you stay consistent and move mindfully, you'll be able to stay moving well and enjoying all the physical activities that you love for as long as possible. So thank you for joining me for this edition of the Vivobarefoot Health Broadcast. Once again, I'm Kellen Mylad. You can find more of my work here on YouTube at Movement Parallels Life. Take good care of yourself, keep on moving, and I'll see you in the next practice.